Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Santos Show. Now, a few things. One, budget cuts. Two, and now let's get on to the video. Now I'm gonna be reading the Libertarian Party Platform. If you want to get a copy of your own Libertarian Party Platform, you can print it, or you can message the Libertarian Party, and then they'll send you a bumper sticker and a few other cool stuff as well, like 15 reasons to vote Libertarian, etc., etc. I did it. I forgot about it, but then a while later it came in the mail, so I have it in my room. Alright, let's get started. I'm going to be reading the Libertarian Party Platform, and I have a 20-minute timer set, so I know when to stop reading, because then I don't want the episode to get too long. Alright, for the preamble. As libertarians, we seek a world of liberty, in which all individuals are sovereign over their own lives and are not forced to sacrifice their value for the benefit of others. We believe that respect for individual rights is the essential precondition for a free and prosperous world, that force and fraud must be banished from human relations, and that only through freedom can peace and prosperity be realized. Consequently, we defend each person's right to engage in any activity that is peaceful and honest, and welcome the diversity that freedom brings. The world we seek is to build as one where individuals are free to follow their own dreams and their own ways, without interference from government or any authoritarian power. In the following pages, we set forth our basic principles and enumerate various policy stands derived from these principles. These specific policies are not our goal, however. Our goal is nothing more nor less than the world set free in our timeline, and it is to this end that we take these stands. I mean, it kind of explains itself, and it doesn't really say much about their policy, so there's not much to explain there. Alright. Now on to the statement of principles, and I'll start the 20-minute timer now. We, the members of the Libertarian Party, challenge the code of the omnipotent state and defend the rights of the individual. We hold that all individuals have the right to exercise sole dominion over their own lives and have the right to live in whatever manner they choose, as long as they do not forcibly interfere with the equal right of others to live in whatever manner they choose. Governments throughout history have regularly operated on the opposite principle, that the state has the right to dispose the lives of individuals and the fruits of their labor. Even within the United States, all political parties other than their own grant the government the right to regulate the lives of individuals and seize fruits of their labor without their consent. We, on the contrary, deny the right of any government to do these things, and hold that where government exists, they must not violate the rights of any individual, namely, 1. The right to life. Accordingly, we support the prohibition of the initiation of physical force against others. 2. The right to liberty of speech and action. Accordingly, we oppose all attempts by government to abridge the freedom of speech and press, as well as the government censorship in any form. And 3. The right to property. Accordingly, we must oppose all government interference with private property such as confiscation, nationalization, and eminent domain, and support the prohibition of robbery, trespass, fraud, and misrepresentation. Since governments, when instituted, must not violate the individual rights, we oppose all interference by government in the areas of voluntary and contractual relations among individuals. People should not be forced to sacrifice their lives and property for the benefit of others. They should be left free by the government to deal with one another as free traders in the resultant economic system. The only one compatible with the protection of individual rights is the free market. Okay, basically, according to these, for let's say for the protests that are going on right now, it says that yes, they support the protest, but they do not support the rioting and destroying of private property. To simplify it. 1. Personal liberty. Individual liberties are inherently free to make choices for themselves and must accept responsibility for the consequence of the choices they make. Our support of an individual's right to make choices in life does not mean that we necessarily approve or disapprove of these choices. No individual, group, or government may rightly initiate force against an individual, group, or government. Libertarians reject the notion that groups have inherent rights. We support the rights of the smallest minority, the individual. Basically, the government's not your dad. 1.1 Self-ownership. Individuals own their bodies and have the rights over them that individuals, groups, and governments may not violate. Individuals have the freedom and responsibility to decide what they knowingly and voluntarily consume, what risk they accept in their own health, finances, safety, or life. So as long as it's not going to hurt anybody else, you're free to take whatever you want. 1.2 Expression and communication. We fully support freedom of expression and oppose the government censorship, regulation, or control of communications media and technology. We favor the freedom to engage in or abstain any religious activities that do not violate the rights of others. We oppose government actions which either aid or attack any religion. So yeah, just as long as you don't hurt anybody, you're free to do whatever. 1.3 Privacy. Libertarians advocate individual privacy and government transparency. We are committed to ending the government's practice on spying on everyone. We must support the rights recognized by the Fourth Amendment to be secure in our persons, homes, property, and communications. Protection from unreasonable search and seizure should include records held by third parties such as email, medical, and library records. So basically, it's against the NSA, CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, etc., etc. 1.4 Personal relationships. Sexual orientation, preference, gender, or gender identity should have no impact on the government's treatment of individuals, such as in current marriage, child custody, adoption, immigration, or military service laws. Government does not have the authority to define, promote, license, or restrict personal relationships regardless of the number of participants. Consenting adults should be free to choose their own sexual practices and personal relationships. Until such a time government stops its illegitimate practice of marriage licensing, such licenses must be granted to all consenting adults who apply. So if you want to marry, if you're a dude and you want to marry 10 dudes and 7 girls, as long as all of them are okay with it, why not? Abortion. Recognizing that abortion is a sensitive issue and that people can hold good faith values on all sides, we believe that the government should be kept out of the matter, leaving the question to each person out of their consensuous consideration. Basically, regardless on whether you're pro-life or not, personally, for yourself, the Libertarian Party is kind of split on that in terms of do they believe that life begins at conception, etc., etc. However, they don't trust the government enough to, even if they were all pro-life, they wouldn't trust the government enough to carry just action. Basically, parental rights. Parents or other guardians have the right to raise their children according to their own standards and belief, provided that the rights of children to be free from abuse and neglect are also protected. So as long as you don't beat your child and as long as you keep them fed, etc., you have the right to be a bad parent, Because if not, then the government's not going to be able to carry it out in a fair manner. Crime and justice. Government force must be limited to the protection of the rights of individuals to life, liberty, and property. And governments must never be permitted to violate these rights. Laws should be limited in their application to violations of the rights of others through force or fraud, or to deliberate actions that place others involuntarily at significant risk or harm. Therefore, we favor the repeal of laws creating crimes without victims, such as gambling, use of drugs for medicinal or recreational purposes, and consensual transactions involving sexual services. We support restitution to the victim to the fullest degree at the expense of the criminal or the negligent wrongdoer. The constitutional rights of the criminally accused, including due process, a speedy trial, legal counsel, trial by jury, and the legal presumption of innocence until proven guilty, must be preserved. We assert that common law right of juries to judge not only the facts but also the justice of the law. We oppose prosecutors' practice of overcharging in criminal prosecutions as to avoid jury trials by initiating defendants into accepting plea bargains. Basically, a lot of things that are currently crimes shouldn't be crimes, and to remove a lot of the different laws around those, and also to keep a fair and just trial in practice. Death penalty. We oppose the administration of death penalty by the state. Self-defense. The only legitimate use of force in defense of individual rights, life, liberty, and justly acquired property against aggression. This right adheres in the individual, who may agree to be aided by another individual or group. We affirm the individual right recognized by the Second Amendment to keep and bear arms and oppose the persecution of individuals from exercising the rights of self-defense. Private property owners should be free to establish their own conditions regarding the presence of personal defense weapons in their property. We oppose all levels of government restricting, registering, or monitoring the ownership, manufacture, or transfer of firearms or ammunitions. Basically, the government shouldn't be involved in gun control. If you don't want guns in your place, you're free to do so. You're free to do so. But if you do want some, then by all means put some there. Chapter 2, Economic Liberty. Libertarians want all members of a society to have abundant opportunities to achieve economic success. A free and competitive market allocates resources in the most efficient manner. Each person has the right to offer goods and services to others on the free market. The only proper role of government in the economic realm is to protect property rights, adjudicate disputes, and provide a legal framework in which voluntary trade is protected. All efforts by the government to redistribute wealth or to control or manage trade are improper in a free society. Basically, get the government out of the economy for the most part. Property and contract. Our respect for property rights is fundamental to maintaining a free and prosperous society. It follows that the freedom to contract to obtain, retain, profit from, manage, or dispose of one's property must also be upheld. Libertarians would free property owners from government restrictions on the rights to control and enjoy their property as long as their choices do not harm or infringe on the rights of others. Eminent domain, civil asset forfeiture, governmental limits on profits, governmental production mandates, and governmental controls on price of goods and services, including wages, rent, and interest, or abridgments of such fundamental rights. For voluntary dealings among private entities, parties should be free to choose with whom they trade and set whatever trade terms are mutually agreeable. So as long as both people are okay with the sale, then there should be no reason why the government should be involved. Environment. Competitive free markets and property rights stimulate the technological innovations and behavioral changes required to protect our environment and ecosystems. Private landowners and conservation groups have a vested interest in maintaining natural resources. Governments are accountable for damage done to our environment and have a terrible track record when it comes... for damage done to our environment and have a terrible track record when it comes to environmental protection. Protecting the environment requires a clear definition and enforcement of individual rights and responsibilities regarding resources like land, water, air, and wildlife, where damages can be proven and quantified in the court of law. Restitution to the injured parties must be required. Basically, the government is less accountable when it comes to protecting the environment, so they should get out of it, because private property owners are more likely to do it well. Energy and resources. While energy is needed to fuel a modern society, government should not be subsidizing any particular form of energy. We oppose all government control of energy pricing, allocation, and production. Basically, the free market will provide the best form of energy, so there's no reason for the government to spend money on it. Government finance and spending. All persons are entitled to keep the fruits of their labor. We call for the repeal of the income tax, the abolishment of the IRS, and all federal programs and services not required under the U.S. Constitution. We oppose any legal requirements forcing employers to serve as tax collectors. We support any initiative to reduce or abolish any tax and oppose any increase for any tax for any reason. To the extent possible, we advocate that all public services be funded in a voluntary manner. Yeah, basically, defund the police and everything else too. The government shouldn't be spending money on a good 90% of what they're spending money on right now. And they're collecting way too many taxes. Government debt. Government should not incur debt which burdens future generations without their consent. We support the passage of a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution, provided that the budget is balanced exclusively by cutting expenditures and not by raising taxes. So, yeah, it's basically saying that the government doesn't have an income problem; they have a spending problem, which they definitely do. They bring in over $2 trillion in taxes a year, and they still manage to spend like a few trillion more every year. Like, that's in trillions, bro. That's a lot. That's like a million. Government employees. We favor repealing any requirement that one must join or pay dues to a union as a condition of government employment. We advocate replacing the defined benefit pensions with defined contribution plans as are commonly offered in the private sector, so as not to impose debt on future generations without their consent. So basically replace the current pension system with like a 401k, etc. And also teachers, police, bus drivers, etc. shouldn't have to join a union in order to be there, which in most states you are required to join a union, and if you're not in the union, you still have to pay union dues, which makes absolutely no sense. And it gives unions such as the teachers union and police union a lot more unwarranted power, which is why it's almost impossible to fire a cop, and if you do, then they just get relocated and they can erase it from their record. Money and financial markets. We favor a free market banking with unrestricted competition among banks and depository institutions of all types. Markets are not usually free unless fraud is vigorously combated. Those who enjoy the possibility of profits must not impose risk of losses upon others, such as through government guarantees or bailouts. We support ending federal student loan guarantees and special treatment of student loan debt and bankruptcy proceedings. Individuals engaged in voluntary exchanges should be free to use as money any mutually agreeable commodity or item. We support a halt to inflationary monetary policies and unconstitutional legal tender laws. Basically, if you want to buy something with another thing instead of money, then you're free to do so. You can barter for it, you know. And also to end basically the Federal Reserve, because they keep on printing away the value of our money. So everybody's savings are being crushed by taxation and inflation. Marketplace freedom. Libertarians support free markets. We defend the right of individuals to form corporations, cooperatives, or any other type of entities based on voluntary association. We oppose all form of government subsidies and bailouts to business, labor, or any other special interest. Government should not compete with private enterprise. Yeah, like the government shouldn't like bail somebody else, because like, for example, right now during the pandemic, while they shut the country down, they paid the airlines to like stay in business. They bailed out the airlines, and then a lot of like the top CEOs, etc., made big campaign contributions with that money so they're basically like, it's corrupt as heck. So don't in any way, shape, or form. Licensing, right? Yeah. Libertarians support the right of every person to earn an honest and peaceful living through the free and voluntary exchange of goods and services. Accordingly, we oppose occupational and other licensing laws that infringe on this right to treat it as a state-granted privilege. We encourage certifications by voluntary associations of professionals, like certificate of need laws. In some states or places, it's illegal to open another, like a hair salon, if you don't have a cosmetology degree, which makes no sense. If you want to like braid hair or whatever, you should braid hair. If you're not good, then you go out of business. And if you still want to flex on people saying, oh, I know a lot about this, then you can go like through a voluntary you can get certified by a voluntary association. It shouldn't have to be mandatory. Sex work. The Libertarian Party supports the decriminalization of prostitution. We assert the right of consenting adults to provide sexual services to clients for compensation, and the rights of clients to purchase sexual services from consenting sex workers. Because, like, there's literally no difference between sex work or any other work except that it includes sex. But it's kind of like competitive boxing, where, you know, you just show your body to the world. It's basically, yeah, it's kind of like boxing or MMA in that sense, where it's like you're putting your body to work instead of like your mind, but you also need your mind for like technique for like boxing, and I don't know about the other because I'm underage. Labor markets. Unemployment and compensation agreements between private employers and employees are outside the scope of government, and these contracts should not be encumbered by the government-mandated benefits or social engineering. We support the right of private employers and employees to choose whether or not to bargain with each other through a labor union. Bargaining should be free government interference, such as compulsory arbitration or imposing an obligation to bargain. So basically, you're free to join a union as long as you're not in the public sector. And I mean, a lot of the jobs that are currently in the public sector should be turned to the private sector. And you can negotiate with your employer on what you want to be paid or your benefits, etc., either by yourself or with your union. Education. Education is best provided by the free market, achieving greater quality, accountability, and efficiency with more diversity of choice. Recognizing that the education of children is a parental responsibility, we should restore authority to the parents to determine the education of their children without interference from government. Parents should have control of and responsibility for all funds expended on their children's education, which I do agree to like some degree, because I know, like, for example, in India, there's like some really cheap private schools, etc., that you can send your kids to. But even if like those things won't exist over here, then I guess we could like turn public schools into charters, so that way you can still choose where to go, and take some restrictions away from private schools as well, which would allow like you to choose what school you want to go to, whether it be a charter or a private school. But for the most part, I think that like what they say is a plan A, but I have like other plan Bs just in case. Healthcare. We favor a free market healthcare system. We recognize the freedom of individuals to determine the level of health insurance they want, if any, the level of healthcare they want, the care providers they want, the medicines and treatments they will use, and other aspects of their medical care, including end-of-life decisions. People should be free to purchase health insurance across state lines. Preach. If you want to buy a Texan healthcare is pretty good. you should be free to do so. And also, like, if you want to go to a certain hospital, you can, unless like it's not in your health insurance. But like if you agree to that, then you have agreed to it. So you should like be free to choose like where you want to buy your medicine, etc. Or you can be free to choose if you want to take any medicine. I mean, generally I trust medicine, but some people don't. Some people are the essential oil types, so they might like, you're free to do so. I mean, that's not really the government's problem. Retirement and income security. Retirement planning is the responsibility of the individual, not the government. Libertarians would phase out the current government-sponsored social security system and transition to a private voluntary system. The proper and most effective source to help the poor in the voluntary efforts of private groups and individuals. We believe that members of society will become more charitable and civil society will be strengthened as government reduces its activity in this realm. Which is true. Whenever taxes and stuff are reduced, then people do end up spending more money on charity. Oh, that seems to be the 20-minute mark. I'll continue explaining this, and then after that, we'll be done. So yeah, I don't like. For example, Joe Jorgensen said that for all the younger folks that are currently paying into Social Security, they'll have an opt-out feature where you can just stop paying Social Security, and then for the older folks that have spent all their money into Social Security because it was required, then at that point those people would be like, they still need to have money like given to them because we forced them to give all the money. It's the least we could do. So at that point, sell like a bunch of government stuff that they don't use, which if Joe Jorgensen is elected, fingers crossed, not very likely, but fingers crossed, then there will be a lot less things that we use. Therefore, we'll have a lot of stuff we can like, a lot more assets we can liquidate and use to like fully phase out Social Security without harming anyone. Alright, that seems to be at the end for this episode. Maybe next time I read the platform will be either on Thursday or on Mondays. Yeah, either next Monday or next Thursday, and at that point I'll be 17. Yay. And I'll start reading from chapter 3, Securing Liberty. Hope you guys have a great day and see you later.